Today on Alex and Autos, we're out here taking a look at the all-new 2016 Buick Cascada. Now, if this vehicle looks familiar to you, that's because it has been around for a while. This is also sold as the Opel Cascada, the Vauxhall Cascada, and very soon, the Holden Cascada in Australia. Oddly enough, if you're shopping for a well-priced four-seat European convertible, look no further than this Buick, because it's actually built in Poland in the same factory that builds the Opel and the Vauxhall. A Buick built in Poland may sound like sacrilege, but you can bet that if General Motors wasn't able to share this vehicle with several different worldwide brands, we wouldn't be getting a Buick convertible at all. The interesting reality about Buick worldwide is that Buick sales have been on an upward trend for the last few years. They've had record-breaking years the last 3 years running, but the average Buick buyer is not old living in America. They're actually young, wealthy, and living in China. There are actually 5 times the number of Buicks sold in China as in the United States. Meanwhile, in the United States, some people are saying that Buick is really just turning into Opel America. There is a benefit to that, however, because vehicles like the Regal, the Verano, the Encore, and this Cascada really wouldn't exist here if it weren't for Opel Europe. Up front, we have a grille that looks a little bit different than the other Buick models in the US. We have these horizontal bars right here. This kind of reminds me of an airplane wing, sort of an airplane fuselage right here, wing right over there. HID headlamps in our particular model and fog lamps. You can definitely tell this vehicle was designed with Europe in mind because we have this large cutout for a front license plate that's designed with the European format. Our model also has front parking sensors, and we have a smaller grille right down at the bottom. Although this Buick was designed in Europe, it is not a small convertible. This is about 10 inches longer than a Volkswagen EOS or an Audi A3 convertible. When you take a look at that ruler at the bottom of your screen, there are a ton of different convertibles down there. That's because there is very little direct competition with this Buick. We no longer have entries like the Sebring or the Solara. Even Volvo's C70 is now dead. Volkswagen's EOS is going to be leaving the United States very soon. 2016 is its last model year. Audi's A3, of course, exists, but it's about 10 inches shorter than this. It's also a little bit more expensive. It's probably the only direct competitor in the US, however. Something like the Camaro convertible or the Ford Mustang convertible, I suppose you could compare them to something like this. They're going to be a little smaller on the inside. They're not going to have the same sort of luxury mission that we see in this particular vehicle, but they will be faster and a little bit more fun. The back end design is clean and elegant. We have these large tail lamp modules that are just on the trunk lid itself. That's because we do have a very large trunk lid here. We have this large bar of chrome that mirrors what we saw on the front, helps bisect this a little bit, gives a little bit more visual interest. Stoplight right here in the middle, shark's fin antenna up top, and an integrated spoiler. And kind of an interesting twist, we actually have a second set of tail lamps. So if we open up this trunk lid, we have a tail lamp, brake light, and turn signal right there on the inside of the trunk lid. This particular touch is likely due to European laws. However, if you find yourself frequently driving around with your trunk lid open, you can actually do that and still have your turn signals and brake lights visible. As you can see, the Cascada is a soft top convertible, not a hard top convertible like we see in the Volkswagen EOS. You'll also notice out back that is not the trunk lid that is opening. That's actually a compartment right in front of the trunk lid. We'll stop the top here so you can see. As we see in other European convertibles, the top descends into a compartment that is partially shared with the trunk, but it's not actually the trunk itself. The trunk lid is actually a separate section that's actually right here under this deck lid. The top descends into this particular compartment, but we could raise this load floor right here if the top is in the up position and use that additional space in the cargo area. Of course, because we're driving topless, that has to be down. Now over here on this side, we do find pop-up pyrotechnic roll bars. So in the event of a rollover, these bars would actually pop up from this structural beam right here behind the rear seats. They may even puncture the soft top itself and keep you from grinding your head on the pavement. From this angle, it should be a little bit more obvious what was going on. This is the trunk lid right back here, and this is the lid for the top compartment. Unlike European models, the Buick gets just one engine under the hood. It's a 1.6-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It produces 200 horsepower and 206 pound-feet of torque. The engine management software will overboost that to 221 pound-feet of torque under very limited circumstances for a short amount of time. The only transmission on offer with this engine is a 6-speed automatic transmission, which is a little bit different than Europe because this engine is generally paired with the manual transmission over there. In terms of overall power, this slots somewhere between the 1.8 and 2-liter turbocharged engines that we see over there in the Audi A3. When it comes to fuel economy, the Buick Cascada is a little bit below the Audi A3 and some of the other entries in this segment. When it comes to front seat comfort, I'm going to give these seats 10 out of 10 points. Of course, keep in mind that the competitive segment is fairly small. These seats do have the optional 4-way adjustable lumbar support. 2-way lumbar support is standard. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion. On the downside, the ventilated seat option and the extending thigh cushion option that we see in the European models does not make it to the American Cascada. Personally, I found the front seats in the A3 convertible a hair less comfortable. It seemed like they were designed for someone a little bit skinnier than me, even though this seat does have fairly aggressive bolstering. The front seats are more adjustable and more comfortable than we find in the Mustang and the Camaro. We even have a four-way adjustable headrest. Let's be honest, rear seat accommodation in a convertible is usually pretty low on the priority list, but the Cascada has a much larger back seat than we find in the average entry in this segment. We have several inches more legroom than you find in the Mustang, the Camaro, or the Audi A3 convertible, although we don't have a fifth seat belt like we do find in the Audi A3. This front seat is comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and I could sit here behind myself. I have essentially no legroom left. My knees are touching the seat, but they're not digging into the seat back. We also find more soft touch plastics back here than you find in a lot of the competition. We actually have a soft touch armrest right here, soft touch upper portion, so you can actually place your elbow right there on the deck lid. Scooting over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, and my knees are digging into the seat back a little bit, but I had a 6'5" person up front. He was very comfortably able to sit there. We also have cup holders for the rear passengers, a 12-volt power outlet right here in the center console, and these rear seats fold in a 50-50 folding fashion, so you can put cargo right in here and still have 3 people in the convertible. Perhaps more importantly, however, is the headroom that we get in the back seat. This is more than you find in the Mustang or the Camaro convertibles. If I sit back in this rear seat, my head definitely is digging into the soft top, but it's not really touching anything hard. I could do this if I had to for a while. However, of course, the big thing to do in a convertible is to just completely remove the headroom problem and open the lid. The trunk is surprisingly accommodating. That's because it spans from right here behind the rear seats all the way to the bumper right in the back. The trunk opening is not quite as large as the dimensions of the trunk itself would suggest. Again, the reason for that is that the top goes into a separate compartment, and that leaves a little bit less room for the trunk lid itself. However, this trunk is quite large. You'll notice I have a 24-inch roller bag right here, and that's actually under that cargo cover. So I could actually have this 24-inch roller bag in this position and still put the top down. You can actually fit 2 24-inch roller bags side by side in the back as long as they're not too thin. You might even be able to fit about 3 22-inch roller bags across the back. And with those bags in that position, you could still put an extra 24-inch roller bag in this position and still close the top. Another nice touch back here is that you'll actually find a spare tire under the cargo load floor. Thanks to that folding 50-50 rear seat back, I'm going to give this trunk 8 out of 10 points when it comes to our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. The majority of the door panels are made from soft touch plastic, so we have a soft touch upper area there. This center tan portion is soft touch, and then a soft touch armrest. However, you do find hard touch plastics around the door handle right here and lower in the door by the storage cubby. Moving over to the dashboard, we find a combination of stitched materials right here, comprising the majority of the dashboard that's reachable by the driver or front passenger, and then hard touch plastics further away. We have a moderately sized glove compartment. It's a combination bin as well as a slot, so we have a slot right there you can put manuals in, etc., and then a bin for other items. I was not able to fit a full-size tablet computer inside. The center stack design is definitely one of GM's older designs. We get their last generation infotainment system and a ton of buttons right here in the center console. Dedicated buttons for the source, presets right over here, track forward, backward, lane departure, monitoring system is right over there, parking sensors over there, door lock buttons above that, and then a navigation wheel for use with this particular system. We have a joystick that goes side to side, up, down. This ring rotates around, and this ring also clicks to enter. Below the infotainment controls, we have a single slot optical disc player, and then we have the controls for our dual zone climate control. You'll also find the buttons for the standard heated seats and standard heated steering wheel here as well. Now, we don't have ventilated seats in America, but you do find them in the European version of the Cascada. Continuing down, we have a single USB input, 12-volt power port, and an auxiliary input. We have a fairly traditional console shifter. Drive is all the way down, manual mode over to the left, up for up and down for down. There are no paddles on the back of the steering wheel. Behind the shifter, we have the electric parking brake control, as well as the control for the top itself. That lowers the top and that raises the top. We also have a button to raise and lower the windows with one press. Between the front seats, we find 2 medium-sized cup holders. They are a little bit close together for large American takeout drinks. Softly padded leather center armrest. It slides forward and backward and also opens to reveal a storage cubby. The instrument cluster is very similar to what we see in the Encore and the Verano. We have a tachometer on the left and a speedometer on the right with a fuel gauge and engine temperature in between them. In between, we also have a monochromatic, and in this particular version, a red tinted multifunction display. The multifunction display is controlled via this toggle ring and the 2 buttons, one there and one there on this turn signal stalk. This allows you to cycle through things like your trip computer as well as adjust a few vehicle settings. The steering wheel is one of General Motors' older 3-spoke designs. We don't find the flat bottom steering wheel in America that you do find in certain Opel trims. We have sport grips right up top. It is leather wrapped and heated in all models. Anytime you chop the top off of a car, you end up with a much less rigid vehicle than you started with. Manufacturers then have to go back in and add extra strengthening around key points in the vehicle to make sure that the car doesn't twist like a wet noodle out on the road. That's important not just for handling, but also for noise, vibration, etc. Because if your vehicle is flexing around, then you're going to get a lot of squeaks and rattles right here around where the convertible top fastens into the vehicle. The first generation Chrysler Sebring definitely had too much body flex. That meant that the vehicle creaked and groaned over uneven pavement, but it also meant that it affected handling and basic vehicle dynamics. General Motors decided they didn't want that same kind of impression to be had when people were driving the Cascada, so they went and added an incredible amount of steel all the way around this vehicle. We have that bulkhead I showed you in the back right behind the rear seats. We have the fact that the trunk and the top compartment are not the same compartment. That actually adds to the structural rigidity of the vehicle, and then of course a great deal of steel all the way around. As a result of that extensive re-engineering, the Cascada has a very solid, very stable, very Germanic feel to it. On the downside, however, this weighs about 900 pounds more than the coupe on which it's based. That means that this Cascada weighs just over 4,000 pounds as it's equipped. In case you're wondering, 4,000 pounds is quite heavy for a modern convertible. This is significantly heavier than an Audi A3, for instance. This is 10 inches longer than an A3, of course, but that doesn't really compensate for the massive increase in curb weight. Curb weight affects every manner of the vehicle's performance. We ran from 0 to 60 in 8.3 seconds, which definitely makes us among the slowest convertibles out there. You will find a slightly slower convertible in the Mini Cooper convertible if you get the base 3-cylinder engine, but this manages to be a hair slower than the base engine in the Audi A3, which goes from 0 to 60 around 8.1 to 8.2 seconds. The Volkswagen EOS convertible, which is of course dead in the United States, will go from 0 to 60 about a full second faster than this, and you can expect something like a base Mustang or base Camaro convertible to go 0 to 60 at least 2 seconds faster than this. The extra curb weight also affects the braking score. We ran from 60 to 0 in 130 feet, which is definitely longer than the average mid-size sedan, and after repeated braking maneuvers, this stretched out to about 145 feet, so there was a decent amount of fade involved. To compensate for the curb weight, all Cascada models get 245 with tires mounted on 20-inch wheels. These are quite large. In addition to that, General Motors gives us their Hyper Strut suspension up front. The Hyper Strut suspension is quite an interesting contraption. In a nutshell, it improves the contact patch of the tire on the road. It makes sure that that tire is always pretty level with the road surface rather than going off camber one direction or another as you turn the wheel. That helps reduce torque steer, and it drastically improves handling in a front-wheel drive vehicle like this. As a result, I'm going to give this a B when it comes to handling. Handling feel, as far as precision goes, is very similar to the Audi A3 convertible, although this handles a little bit lower in terms of absolute grip. In fact, the handling is impressive enough that when we started taking a look at the acceleration and the braking scores, I kept thinking to myself that something must be wrong, because how could this vehicle handle this well but not brake as well as I would have liked? It's all down to the curb weight, but the handling ability is all down to the excellent suspension design. The Cascada does not have a lot of steering feel because of course this uses an electric power steering rack, but the steering weight is just about perfect, and the steering rack is also very, very precise. This goes exactly where you point it. In the corners, body roll is very well composed in the Cascada, which also is a little bit surprising for a vehicle that is this heavy. Now we do get a little bit more tip and dive and a little bit more body roll than we see in the Audi A3, but overall this is not your grandmother's Buick convertible. Out here on gravel roads like this, the ride is very well composed, even though we do have those 20-inch wheels and tires, and the suspension is fairly firm. Likely the increased curb weight of the Cascada is helping out here. With the top firmly latched in place, we measured 73 decibels of noise at 50 miles an hour, which means the Cascada is one of the quieter convertibles that we've tested. Now you will find quieter luxury convertibles, but something like a Mustang or a Camaro, they're going to be a little bit louder. One of the definite downsides to this Buick's curb weight is the fuel economy. We've been averaging 20 to 21 miles per gallon over a week of very mixed driving. That's definitely below what the EPA says you should be getting in the Cascada. Of course, we have been having a decent amount of fun, as you can see out on these winding mountain roads. It's actually very easy to push the Cascada hard out here. However, fuel economy is not going to be as good as something like the Audi A3 convertible. Even the Audi A3 with all-wheel drive and the larger 2-liter turbocharged engine will get better fuel economy, likely because of the curb weight. Because I live out here in the coastal mountains of Northern California, my driving involves an awful lot of hill climbing. So if you're living in a flatter area, you will likely get better fuel economy scores, probably a little bit closer to the EPA scores, perhaps even the EPA highway score. The big thing you'll notice about the Cascada out on the road is how easy this convertible is to live with. It's comfortable. We actually have seats in the back that you can use for real human adults. It's easy to drive. It's fun out on the road. The acceleration is a little bit slower than I would like, but it's definitely usable. My only real complaint out on the road is that the center stack is quite busy, as I showed you earlier, and that means that when you're driving out here, it is a little bit difficult to find the exact button that you're after in the center console without taking your eyes off the road. In terms of the on-road nature of the Cascada, if you're looking for a replacement for your EOS convertible or your Volvo C70 convertible, the Cascada is definitely a worthy replacement. Obviously, this is not a hardtop convertible, it is a soft-top convertible, but in today's convertible market, there just aren't any hardtops in this same price range. The Buick is very well priced for 2016. It starts at $33,065, and the model we've been driving here is only $3,000 more at $36,665. $36,000 is right around where the Audi A3 starts, and again, this is essentially a fully loaded model for about the same price. BMW's 4 Series is nearly $20,000 more than this Buick, and it's the BMW that's about the same size. You can get the BMW 2 Series convertible as well, but it's still going to be more expensive than this, even though it's smaller. This is so well priced that a Mustang is only $3,000 less than this, but it comes with about $5,000 less equipment, meaning that to equip your Mustang the same as the base model of the Cascada, it's going to cost you about $35,000. Comparisons to the Cascada are tricky because the Buick is a premium entry in the United States, not a luxury entry, not a mainstream entry. What that really means is that on the inside we don't find real wood trim or upgraded Napa leather seats, that sort of thing, like you do find in the luxury branded vehicles like the BMW 4 Series for $20,000 more than this, but we find more standard equipment on the inside, standard leather seats, that sort of thing that you don't find in base versions of a Camaro or a Mustang. Perhaps the two closest competitors to the Buick would be the A3 Cabrio, which starts about $3,500 more than this Buick, or the Mini Cooper, which starts about $7,000 less than the Buick. The Audi A3 convertible is a full 10 inches shorter than this Buick. It's most noticeable in the back seat and the trunk. This has a trunk that's a decent amount larger than the A3, especially if you have the top in place and you want to put more luggage in the back for a weekend trip away. On the flip side, the A3's handling is incredible, and its base engine actually has very similar performance to this Buick because of the curb weight. The A3 is substantially lighter than this Buick Cascada. This is nearly 4,000 pounds in most trims. Some trims will even get it over that 4,000 pound mark, and that does take a dent on braking, acceleration, and handling ability. In addition, you can get the A3 Cabrio with a 2-liter turbocharged engine. It's definitely going to be faster and handle better than this Buick. However, you're going to have to pay for that extra ability because the A3 is always going to be more expensive than a comparably equipped Cascada. Now, in my mind, I think the A3 is worth the upgrade. It's my favorite entry in this particular segment. However, the Cascada is definitely a better value. You might be tempted to think that the Mini convertible in base form would outhandle the Cascada in base form, but you'd actually be wrong. The Cascada is going to be faster. It's also going to handle better than that base Mini Cooper because we have much wider tires in this vehicle, and the overall suspension design is excellent. Over there in the Mini Cooper, we have fairly narrow tires in that base vehicle. We also have a base 3-cylinder turbocharged engine that's significantly less powerful than we find in this. Of course, there is that S trim of the Mini, which is going to be faster than the Buick. However, it's going to cost you more than the Buick as well. In fact, if you comparably equip your 3-cylinder Mini convertible to the same equipment that we're seeing in the base version of the Cascada, it's actually going to be about the same price or slightly more expensive depending on how you tweak those options. The Volkswagen EOS is a little bit less expensive than base versions of the Cascada, and it does have a folding hardtop, not the soft top that we're seeing right here. Soft tops may require a little bit more maintenance long term because you may have to replace the fabric after a while, but repair and maintenance costs on the mechanism are going to be a little bit higher in a hardtop. Of course, as I've already said, the EOS is not long for the world because Volkswagen has already killed it off. If you don't include the value of the hardtop in your comparison between the EOS and the Buick is actually a better buy than the Volkswagen, because even though this is a little bit more expensive, we have about $4,000 more standard equipment in the Buick than we find over there in the Volkswagen. It really just depends on how much value you place on the soft top versus the hard top. Obviously, this is not going to be as much fun as a rear-wheel drive Mustang convertible or a Camaro convertible, even though this is a European convertible at heart. However, this is going to be a better deal than the Mustang convertible or the Camaro convertible if you care about luxury features on the inside. Even though this is a little bit less expensive than a Mustang, we get considerably more content on the inside and actually a considerably nicer interior as well, even though this interior has already been around for a few years. Remember, this is new to America, but it's not new to the world. The Buick gives you standard niceties like a heated leather steering wheel, heated seats, adjustable lumbar support, a nicer dash, 7-inch infotainment screen, standard OnStar, etc. that we just don't find over there in the base Mustang or in the base Camaro for the most part. On the flip side, of course, the Mustang and the Camaro will be more fun out on the road. They're going to be faster out on the road as well. They just won't have the same level of creature comforts on the inside or as practical of a back seat or a trunk. This trunk is nearly twice the trunk that we find in the Camaro, for instance. If my money were on the line, my top pick would be the Audi A3 Cabrio. I think the A3 suits me just a little bit better. We have the practicality of that 5th seat belt in the rear, even though the rear seats are a little bit more compact than we see in the Buick. The dashboard is a little bit cleaner and a little bit more modern. Now, as I said, the A3 is going to be a little bit smaller. The back seat and the trunk are not going to be quite as large as we see in this Buick, and it's going to be more expensive. When equipped comparably, the 1.8-liter turbocharged version of the A3 is already going to be a little bit more expensive than the Cascada. The 2-liter turbocharged version that would be my preference in this segment is going to be significantly more expensive than this. However, it's definitely going to be less expensive than something like a BMW 4 Series. The A3 with the 2-liter turbocharged engine also gets all-wheel drive, which really helps improve the handling dynamics and the overall feel of the vehicle out on the road. It's definitely the top-handling, top-performing vehicle in, again, this miniaturized segment. Obviously, however, it's impossible to go wrong with the Cascada. This is easily the top value entry in the segment. The A3 may handle better, it may perform better, but you're definitely going to pay extra for that improved performance and the improved dynamics. The Cascada does very well for itself. In fact, I'd say incredibly well for itself considering how much this vehicle weighs. We get incredibly little body flex, incredibly little body roll in this vehicle. It definitely is a corner carver out on the road. I would only wish for slightly improved braking ability and slightly improved acceleration. The acceleration is a little bit on the slow side for me in this particular segment. When we start talking about value, however, and feature content for the dollar, this simply blows away everything else in this segment, including the base Mustang and Camaro convertibles. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Be sure and check out those related videos on the side of your screen. Hit the subscribe button down there at the bottom of this video or below this video, and I'll see you next week.